The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going for 6 hours, and nothing had changed. Ambassador Park Min-jun sat in the human delegation section, watching the chaos unfold before him. Representatives from 47 different species shouted, argued, and pleaded with each other. The translation devices built into the chamber worked overtime, turning alien words into something everyone could understand. The problem was simple. The solution was not. The Velcron Empire was coming, and no one knew how to stop them. Min-jun glanced at his companion, Captain Lee Soo-jin, who sat beside him in her dark blue uniform. She looked calm, but he knew her well enough to see the tension in her shoulders. Her eyes tracked every speaker, analyzing everything like the military officer she was. "They're panicking," Soo-jin whispered in Korean, keeping her voice low. "Can you blame them?" Min-jun replied in the same language. "The Velcron fleet will be here in 3 days." On the central display, a holographic map showed the approaching threat. Red icons marked 500 warships, all moving toward the Council's home system. The Velcron Empire had been conquering its way across this part of the galaxy for 20 years. They had destroyed 6 civilizations completely. Now, they wanted the Council worlds. A tall, insect-like delegate from the Chiric species stood up. His translation device made his clicking sounds into words. "We have tried everything. Our combined fleet cannot match their numbers. Our weapons barely scratch their shields. We are doomed. We could surrender," suggested a Morphean representative, her tentacles writhing nervously. Perhaps the Velcron would show mercy. Bitter laughter filled the chamber. Everyone knew the Velcron showed no mercy. They took what they wanted and destroyed everything else. The council leader, an ancient Thessian named Elder Vorn, raised his hands for silence. His skin was wrinkled and gray, and he looked tired. "We will not surrender, but we must be realistic. Our military forces are insufficient. Our planetary shields will hold for perhaps a week under sustained bombardment. We need a miracle." I Fing. Min-jun felt dozens of eyes turn toward the human section. He knew what they were thinking. In that time, humans had become known as excellent traders, skilled diplomats, and clever engineers. They operated merchant vessels throughout Council space. They helped negotiate treaties. They sold useful technology and bought exotic goods. But warriors? No. Humans were not warriors. Earth had contributed a small defense force to the Council fleet, of course. 20 ships, all designed for patrol duties and escort missions. Nothing that would help against 500 Velcron warships. Everyone knew humans were peaceful. Soft, some species said privately. Not fighters. Min-jun had worked hard to build that reputation. So had every human ambassador before him. A Velcron transmission interrupted the session. The holographic display shifted, showing the face of Admiral Zrath-Thor. He was a massive creature, covered in thick scales, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like burning coals. His species had evolved on a high-gravity world, making them incredibly strong and dense. "Galactic Council," Zrath-Thor's voice boomed through the chamber. "You have seen what happens to those who resist the Velcron Empire. 6 civilizations tried to fight us. 6 civilizations are now dust. We do not wish to destroy you, but we will, if necessary. You have 72 hours to surrender. Open your worlds to Velcron rule, and you will be allowed to live as our subjects. Refuse, and we will erase every Council world from existence. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. Choose wisely." The transmission ended. Silence filled the chamber for a long moment. Then the panic exploded again. Representatives shouted over each other. Some called for immediate surrender. Others wanted to fight to the last breath. A few simply broke down in despair. Elder Vorn looked older than ever. He turned to Min-jun, and their eyes met across the chamber. "Ambassador Park, Does humanity have any counsel to offer? You have been quiet throughout this crisis. Every eye in the chamber focused on the human delegation. Min Jun stood slowly, feeling the weight of what was about to happen. He had hoped to avoid this moment. Humanity had hoped to avoid this moment for 200 years. Elder Forn, honored representatives, Min Jun began, his voice steady. I must contact my government before I can respond. The situation has become critical, and I need authorization for what I am about to propose. You need permission to tell us to surrender? Someone shouted from the back of the chamber. No, Min Jun said quietly. I need permission for something else entirely. Something humanity has not done in a very long time. Confusion rippled through the council. Su Jin stood up beside Min Jun, her military bearing suddenly very obvious. Several representatives noticed the change in her posture. She looked different somehow. Dangerous. How long do you need? Elder Vorn asked. 48 hours, Min Jun said. That leaves only 24 hours before the Velcron deadline. A delegate protested. I understand, Min Jun replied. But I assure you, if my government agrees to what I am about to request, 24 hours will be more than enough time. The chamber erupted in questions. But Min Jun simply bowed respectfully and left, with Su Jin following close behind. They walked through the corridors of the council station in silence until they reached the secure human communications room. Once inside, with the door sealed and encryption activated, Su Jin turned to him. Are you really going to ask for authorization? I have to, Min Jun said, his fingers moving across the communication console. We can't let the council fall. And we can't let the Velcron continue their expansion. They'll reach Earth eventually. The secret will be out, Su Jin said softly. Everyone will know what we are. What we were. I know. Min Jun finished entering his security codes. But what choice do we have? The quantum communication link activated instantly, connecting directly to Earth High Command. The face that appeared on the screen was an older woman with sharp eyes and gray hair. Fleet Admiral Choi Un-suk, the highest-ranking military officer in the Earth Defense Force. Ambassador Park, she said formally. I've been watching the council session. The situation is critical. Yes, Admiral, Min Jun said. I'm requesting authorization code Omega-7. Un-suk's expression didn't change, but Min Jun saw her hand tighten on her desk. Omega-7 was the authorization code for unsealing the old weapons. The ones humanity had locked away after the unification wars nearly destroyed Earth. You understand what you're asking? Un-suk said carefully. I do, Admiral. The Velcron will not stop. If the Council falls, they will eventually reach human space. And if we fight them with our current fleet, we will lose. The only way to stop them is to show them what we used to be. For a long moment, Un-suk said nothing. Her eyes moved to something off-screen, probably reviewing classified reports. Then, she looked back at Min Jun. The President and the Security Council have been discussing this possibility. We hoped it would never come to this. We've worked for 2 centuries to make the galaxy see us as merchants and peacemakers, not as weapons. I know, Min Jun said. But sometimes, peace can only be protected by those willing to fight for it. I'm pleased now. Un-suk nodded slowly. Authorization code Omega-7 is granted. Captain Lee, you are hereby activated to full military command. Report to Fleet Admiral Song at Lunar Base Serenity. He will brief you on the assets being unsealed. Su Jin saluted sharply. Yes, Admiral. Ambassador Park, you will inform the Council that Earth is responding to the crisis. Tell them our fleet will arrive at the Council homeworld within 48 hours. Tell them nothing else. Number. Understood, Admiral. And Park? Un-suk's voice softened slightly. I hope we're making the right choice. So do I, Admiral. The transmission ended. Min Jun and Su Jin looked at each other in the sudden silence. 200 years. Su Jin said quietly. We've been hiding for 200 years. Tomorrow, everyone will know the truth. Not the whole truth, Minjun said. They'll know we have weapons. They won't know why we sealed them away. They won't understand what it cost us to become what we are now. Cross. We have depersided. Cross. We won't know why we sealed. Sujin touched the military insignia on her uniform. Most species thought it was decorative. They didn't know it represented bloodlines going back to the Unification Wars. They didn't know her great-great-grandmother had been a ship captain during the darkest days of human history. Will they fear us? Sujin asked. When they see what we can do? Probably, Minjun admitted. But I'd rather they fear us than watch the Velcron destroy everything. We can deal with fear. We can prove we're still the same people who've been their friends and allies. But we can't do any of that if the Velcron win. Sujin nodded and headed for the door. She paused with her hand on the panel. Minjun, when the fighting starts, some of the council species will wonder why we never told them. Why we let them think we were weak. Minjun thought about the history files he had studied. The Unification Wars had killed 3 billion people. They had built machines that could erase cities in seconds. And they had used those weapons against each other until the survivors looked at the devastation and decided to never let it happen again. The weapons had been sealed. The old warships had been hidden on the dark side of the moon and in asteroid fields. Humanity had chosen to start over, to be something better than the monsters they had become. Tell them the truth if they ask, Minjun said finally. We hid our weapons because we were ashamed of what we had built. We were afraid of what we might become if we kept being soldiers. So we chose to be merchants instead. We chose peace. And now we have to choose war again, Sujin said. No, Minjun corrected her gently. Now we have to protect the peace we've built. That's different. The old humanity fought because they enjoyed power. We're going to fight because we have no other choice. We're going to fight to stop people who would destroy everything good we've found out here among the stars. Sujin smiled slightly. That's a nice speech. Think the council will buy it? I hope so. Because in 48 hours, they're going to see things that will terrify them. They're going to wonder if they've been living next to monsters this whole time. We need them to understand that we're still their friends. We're just friends who remember how to be very, very dangerous when we need to be. Sujin saluted and left. Minjun stood alone in the communications room for a long moment, then returned to the council chamber. Elder Vorn looked at him expectantly as he entered. The chamber had quieted somewhat, but tension still filled the air. Representatives watched Minjun with desperate hope. Honored Council, Minjun said formally. I have contacted my government. Earth will respond to the Velcron threat. Our fleet will arrive at the Council homeworld within 48 hours. 20 ships? Someone scoffed. What difference will 20 ships make against 500? Minjun met the speaker's eyes. We're not sending 20 ships. We're sending something else. Something we haven't used in a very long time. What does that mean? Elder Vorn asked. It means, Minjun said, carefully, choosing his words with great precision, that humanity asks the Council to trust us for 48 hours. When our fleet arrives, you will understand. Until then, I can say nothing more. The chamber exploded with questions and protests, but Minjun simply bowed and returned to his seat. He had said all he could. Now everything depended on what happened when the old weapons woke up. On the dark side of Earth's moon, massive hangar doors that had been sealed for 2 centuries began to open. Warning lights activated in facilities that had been dark for longer than most council species had known humanity existed. Ancient systems came online, running through diagnostic checks that had not been performed in generations. And deep in those facilities, in the cold and darkness of space, something stirred. Something that humanity had built long ago and locked away, hoping never to use again. The war machines were waking up, and the galaxy was about to learn the truth about Earth's peaceful merchants and gentle diplomats. They had not always been peaceful. They had not always been gentle. And they had never, ever forgotten how to fight. Captain Lee Soo-jin had never been to lunar base Serenity. Most humans hadn't. It was not on any public maps. Tourist shuttles flew past this region of the moon without ever knowing what lay beneath the gray dust and ancient craters. Even most Earth Defense Force personnel had no idea it existed. The transport shuttle descended toward coordinates that showed nothing but empty lunar surface. Then, as they approached, massive doors began to open in the ground. They were each a kilometer wide, disguised to look like natural terrain. Dust that had settled for 2 centuries billowed up as the ancient mechanisms engaged. Soo-jin felt her breath catch as the shuttle dropped into the facility. The hangar stretched out in all directions, so vast she could not see the far walls. And everywhere she looked, she saw ships, not like the clean, efficient patrol vessels that humanity operated in Council space. These were different. They looked predatory even when motionless. Their hulls were dark, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Strange geometries covered their surfaces, and even powered down, they seemed to radiate menace. "Welcome to Serenity, Captain," a voice said over the comm. "This is Fleet Admiral Song. Proceed to Docking Bay 7. We have much to discuss, and very little time." The shuttle landed, and Soo-jin stepped out onto a platform that had not felt footsteps in living memory. The air was cold and tasted recycled. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow. Crew members moved through the facility, but they looked nervous. Many were historians and engineers, not soldiers. They were here because they had studied the old technology, not because they had ever expected to use it. Fleet Admiral Song met her at the platform. He was a man in his 60s, with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. He wore an old-style military uniform, one from before the modern era. It looked strange on him, like a costume from a museum. "Captain Lee," he said formally, "I wish we were meeting under better circumstances." "As do I, Admiral," Soo-jin replied. Song gestured for her to follow. They walked through corridors lined with equipment that looked ancient and futuristic at the same time. The technology was old, yes, but it had been cutting-edge once, and based on what Soo-jin knew of modern Council weapons, it was still far beyond anything the current galaxy used. "How much do you know about the Unification Wars?" Song asked as they walked. "What everyone knows," Soo-jin said. Earth was divided. Nations fought each other. 3 billion people died. Finally, the survivors unified under a single government and sealed away the weapons that had nearly destroyed us. "That's the simplified version," Song said. "The truth is more complicated. The Unification Wars lasted 40 years. They started with conventional weapons, then nuclear weapons, then things much worse. By the end, humanity had learned to manipulate the basic forces of reality itself. We could tear holes in space. We could stop time in localized areas. We could make matter simply cease to exist." He stopped at a window that overlooked the main hangar. Soo-jin looked down at the ships below. There were 12 of them, each roughly the same size as a Council battlecruiser, but they looked wrong somehow, like they did not quite belong in normal space. "We called them the Requiem class," Song continued. "Each one was designed to end wars, not win them. Mind you, end them. They were so powerful that any side possessing even one could force everyone else to negotiate. That was the theory. Anyway, what went wrong?" Soo-jin asked. "Both sides built them," Song said quietly. "When everyone has weapons that can destroy everything, someone always decides to strike first." The final battle of the Unification Wars involved 8 Requiem-class ships firing on each other. When the dust settled, Australia was gone. Just gone. Erased from existence along with 200 million people. Soo-jin felt cold. She had known the wars were terrible, but this detail was not in the public histories. After that, the survivors sealed everything. Song said. The Requiem ships, the reality manipulation technology, all of it. We decided to start over. We focused on becoming something better than what we had been. When we met the Council species, we made sure they saw us as traitors and diplomats. We never wanted anyone to know what we were capable of, and now we have to become weapons again, Sujin said. No. Song corrected her, and his voice was firm. We're not becoming weapons. We're using weapons to protect something worth protecting. There's a difference, Captain. Our ancestors forgot that difference. And it nearly cost us everything. We cannot forget it now. He turned from the window and looked at her directly. You've been chosen to command the flagship, the Requiem herself. Do you know why? Sujin shook her head. Because your psychological profile shows something rare. You have the tactical skills to use these weapons effectively, but you also have the moral strength to use them reluctantly. You understand that every shot you fire is a failure of something better. I'm not sure I'm worthy of that trust, Admiral, Sujin said honestly. None of us are, Song replied. But you're the best choice we have. Come. Let me show you what you'll be commanding. They took a lift down to the hangar floor. Up close, the Requiem was even more intimidating. The hull was midnight black, covered in geometric patterns that seemed to shift when Sujin was not looking directly at them. The ship was 700 meters long, shaped like a blade. A boarding ramp extended, and they entered the ship. Inside, systems were coming online after centuries of sleep. Lights flickered on one by one. Displays showed text in Old Korean and English, languages that had evolved significantly in 200 years. The bridge was surprisingly small. Only 10 crew stations surrounded a central command chair. Advanced AI handled most shipboard functions, meaning the Requiem needed far fewer crew than modern vessels. The AI is called Memoria, Song explained. It's a quantum intelligence, capable of making tactical decisions faster than any organic mind. But it cannot fire weapons without human authorization. That safeguard is built into its core programming. A holographic interface appeared above the command chair. A pleasant female voice spoke in modern Korean. Captain Lee Sujin, I am Memoria. Tactical intelligence for the Requiem. My systems have been dormant for 203 years, 4 months, and 16 days. All primary systems are operational. Weapons systems are currently sealed pending command authorization. Welcome aboard. Thank you, Memoria, Sujin said, feeling strange talking to a ship that was older than her great-great-grandparents. Let me show you what the Requiem can do, Song said. He called up displays, showing weapon specifications that made Sujin's blood run cold. The primary weapon was called a spatial severance cannon. It did not fire projectiles or energy beams. Instead, it created a targeted rupture in space-time itself. Anything caught in the effect simply stopped existing, erased from reality at the quantum level. No shields could stop it, because shields existed in normal space, and the weapon operated outside those rules. The defensive systems were equally terrifying. The Requiem could project a quantum displacement field that shunted incoming attacks into pocket dimensions. Missiles, energy weapons, even physical projectiles, would simply vanish before reaching the hull. And if something did get through, the hull itself was made from degenerate matter held in stasis fields, making it nearly indestructible. Then there was the time dilation system. The Requiem could create localized fields where time moved at different speeds. An enemy ship could be frozen in time, while the Requiem maneuvered freely. Or the Requiem itself could speed up, moving and thinking faster than anything else in the battle space. How do you fight something like this? Sujin asked quietly. You don't, Song said. That was the problem. These ships were designed to be invincible. And when both sides had invincible weapons, the only question was, who could erase the other first? Sujin sat in the command chair. It adjusted to her body automatically, interfaces appearing at her fingertips. She could feel the ship around her, sense its systems through the neural link that was part of the chair. The Requiem was awake and ready, and it wanted to fly again. The other 11 ships are being crewed as we speak, Song said. Most of the crew are like you, historians and researchers who specialized in old military technology. We've been training in simulators for the past few hours, getting used to systems we've only read about in files. Will we be ready in time? Sujin asked. We'll have to be. The Velcron fleet will reach the Council homeworld in 46 hours. We leave in 12 hours. That gives you and your crew time to run through basic maneuvers and weapons tests. Weapons tests? Sujin looked alarmed. Admiral, if we fire these things near Earth, we won't be testing them here, Song assured her. There's an asteroid field in the outer system designated for this purpose. The asteroids are made of solid iron, chosen specifically because they're hard to destroy. They'll give us a good indication of what the Requiem can do. Over the next hours, the rest of the Requiem's crew arrived. They were all specialists in historical technology, all chosen for their psychological stability and moral clarity. Lieutenant Park Ji-woo, the weapons officer, had written her dissertation on the ethics of reality manipulation warfare. Commander Kim Tae-hyun, the navigator, had spent 10 years studying the navigation logs from the Unification Wars. Each crew member had dedicated their lives to understanding the past, never expecting to live through it. They gathered on the bridge as Song prepared to leave. He looked at each of them, in turn. I know you're afraid, he said. I would be worried if you weren't. These weapons terrify me, and I've studied them for 40 years. But remember why we're doing this. The Velcron Empire will not stop until every free species in the galaxy is enslaved or dead. The Council species are our friends. They've been our partners and allies for 2 centuries. We cannot let them fall. What if we become monsters? Ji-woo asked quietly. What if using these weapons changes us? That's why you were chosen, Song said. Because you ask that question. Because you understand that power without restraint is the path to everything our ancestors did wrong. You will be tempted to use maximum force. You will have the power to erase entire fleets with a single shot. But you must remember that every life you take, even an enemy life, is a failure of something better. He moved to the exit ramp. The Council species will be terrified when they see what you can do. Some of them will wonder if they've been living next to monsters. Prove them wrong. Fight only as much as necessary. Disable enemy ships rather than destroying them when possible. Show the galaxy that humanity learned from its mistakes. After Song left, the crew ran through system checks. Everything came online perfectly. Systems that had slept for 2 centuries working as if they had been built yesterday. Memoria guided them through the procedures, her voice patient and calm. Finally, it was time for the weapons test. The Requiem lifted off from the hangar, its gravity systems making the motion so smooth that Sujin barely felt they were moving. The other 11 ships followed, a formation that had not flown together in 200 years. They reached the asteroid field within an hour. The asteroids were massive chunks of iron, each one several kilometers across. Sujin designated one as the target. Memoria, charge the spatial severance cannon, she ordered. Minimum yield. Charging. Memoria confirmed. Weapon. Ready. Sujin took a breath. Fire. The Requiem did not shake or recoil. There was no dramatic light show. One moment the asteroid existed. The next moment, a perfectly spherical section of it simply vanished. 20 kilometers of solid iron erased from reality in an instant. The rest of the asteroid, suddenly unbalanced, began to tumble. The bridge was silent. Ji-woo stared at her display, her face pale. Captain, that was minimum yield. We have settings that go up to. I know, Sujin said quietly. She did know. At maximum yield, the spatial severance cannon could erase a small moon. Test the defensive systems next. They fired probes at the ship, simulating incoming attacks. The quantum displacement field activated automatically. Missiles simply vanished before impact, shunted into pocket dimensions where they exploded harmlessly outside normal space. Energy beams disappeared as if they had never existed. Physical projectiles were sent away before they could touch the hull. "Nothing's getting through," Taehyun said, awe in his voice. "We're completely invulnerable." "Nothing is invulnerable," Sujin corrected him. "These systems just make us very, very hard to hurt. Remember that. Confidence becomes arrogance, and arrogance gets people killed." They spent the remaining hours drilling on maneuvers and coordination. The 12 ships moved in formation, each one operated by a crew that was learning ancient lessons. By the time they were done, everyone understood both the terrible power they commanded and the responsibility that came with it. Finally, the moment arrived. The fleet formed up and engaged their quantum drives, a faster-than-light system that operated differently from the Council's slipstream technology. Space folded around them, and they began the journey to the Council homeworld. In the command chair, Sujin felt the ship around her. The Requiem was happy to be moving again. She could sense it through the neural link, an AI that had been waiting for 2 centuries to fulfill its purpose. But that purpose had been designed by people who thought power alone could solve problems. "Memoria," Sujin said quietly. "What was your last mission?" "Before the ships were sealed? My final mission was classified," Memoria replied. "But I can tell you the result. I participated in the final battle of the Unification Wars. I fired 17 times. Each shot removed an enemy vessel from existence. 3,214 people died by my weapons. After the battle, I asked my captain if we had won. What did they say? They said that when you have to ask if you won, you probably lost. Then they cried. I have spent 200 years analyzing that statement. I believe I finally understand it." "What's your understanding?" Sujin asked. "Victory is not measured in enemies destroyed," Memoria said. "It is measured in what you protect and who you become in the process of protecting it. We were designed as weapons, but perhaps we can be something more. Perhaps we can be shields instead." Sujin smiled slightly. "I think you've learned well, Memoria. Let's hope we can teach that lesson to the Velkron Empire without destroying them in the process." The fleet traveled through folded space, moving toward a confrontation that would change everything. Behind them, Earth waited nervously. Ahead of them, the Council braced for what was coming, and the Velkron Empire prepared their 500 warships, confident in their superiority. None of them were ready for what humanity's forgotten war machines would do when they finally arrived. Admiral Zrath Thor stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Endless Conquest, and felt pleased with himself. Before him, displayed on screens that covered the entire forward wall, the Galactic Council's home system waited helplessly. Their pathetic fleet of 200 ships had arranged itself in a defensive formation around the inhabited worlds. It would make no difference. 500 ships, Zrath Thor said to his second-in-command. "Against their 200. This will be over quickly. Should we offer surrender terms again, Admiral?" the officer asked. "No," Zrath Thor replied. "They had their chance. Now, they will learn what happens when lesser species refuse the Empire's generosity." Zrath Thor was a Velkron of the old bloodlines, from a family that had conquered 7 star systems before the Empire even existed. His species had evolved on a world with crushing gravity and lethal predators. They were built for war, with armored scales, 4 powerful arms, and reflexes faster than most species could track. Every Velkron was a warrior. Their entire culture celebrated strength and conquest, and they had never lost a battle. Not once in 20 years of expansion. "Admiral," the sensor officer called out, "I'm detecting an anomaly." "What kind of anomaly?" "Unknown, sir. It's a spatial distortion, appearing at the edge of the system. Energy readings are off the scale. It's like nothing in our database. Thanks for watching. I may be readings. Thanks for watching." Zrath Thor felt a moment of curiosity, but dismissed it. probably some desperate attempt by the Council to deploy a new weapon. It would fail, like everything else they tried. Then the distortion resolved, and 12 ships appeared in normal space. Zrath Thor stared at the displays. The ships were smaller than his battle cruisers, each one maybe 700 meters long. Their hulls were dark, almost black, covered in strange geometric patterns. They looked old and outdated compared to the sleek Velkron warships. 12 ships? Zrath Thor laughed. The Council is even more desperate than I thought. What species built those? Some. The sensor officer worked at his console, running identification protocols. After a moment, his expression became confused. Admiral, the computer identifies them as human vessels, but that makes no sense. Humans don't have ships like that. They operate merchant vessels and small patrol craft. Humans? Zrath Thor's laughter grew louder. The merchants? The traders? They send 12 obsolete warships against my 500? This is insulting. Throughout the Velkron fleet, similar reactions occurred. Commanders looked at their screens with disbelief and amusement. Humans were known throughout the Council as peaceful, non-threatening species. They sold goods, negotiated treaties, and built trade stations. They were not warriors. On the Council fleet, the reaction was different. Ambassador Park Min-jun stood on the command deck of the Council's lead ship beside Elder Vorn. When the human fleet appeared, Min-jun closed his eyes briefly and took a deep breath. "That's what you were waiting for?" Elder Vorn asked, confusion in his voice. 12 ships? Ambassador, I appreciate the gesture, but 12 ships cannot turn this battle. The Velkron outnumber us badly already. Adding 12 more vessels will not change the outcome. Elder Vorn, Min-jun said quietly. I suggest you move your fleet back. Put at least 1 million kilometers between your ships and the Velkron. Why? What difference will that make? Because in about 5 minutes, you will see things that will be difficult to believe. I want your people safe. When that happens, the tone in Min-jun's voice made Elder Vorn hesitate. The human ambassador looked different somehow. He stood straighter, his expression harder than Vorn had ever seen. There was something in his eyes that had not been there before. Something that made the ancient Thessian wonder what humans really were beneath their friendly exteriors. All ships, Vorn ordered slowly, retreat to distance of 1 million kilometers. Maintain defensive formation. The Council fleet began to move. On the Velkron flagship, this caused more laughter. They're running already, Zrath Thor announced. Before we even fire a shot. This is what happens when weak species try to fight. They remember they are prey. Should we pursue, Admiral? An officer asked. Not yet. Let them retreat. Let them feel their fear grow. Then we will destroy them slowly, so they have time to regret their defiance. The 12 human ships moved forward in formation, positioning themselves between the Velkron fleet and the Council worlds. They looked impossibly small against the mass of Velkron warships. It was like watching insects challenge a stampede. Zrath Thor decided to be merciful. He would give the humans one chance to flee before destroying them. He opened a communication channel to the lead human vessel. Captain Lee Soo-jin's face appeared on his screen. Zrath Thor was surprised. She looked young, with sharp eyes, and an expression that showed no fear. Most species showed fear when facing the Velkron fleet. Human captain, Zrath Thor said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. I am Admiral Zrath Thor of the Velkron Empire. You have positioned your vessels between my fleet and my targets. This is foolish. I will give you one opportunity to withdraw. Take your 12 ships and leave this system. Do this, and I will let you live. Soo-jin looked at him for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was calm and steady. Admiral Zrath Thor, I am Captain Lee Soo-jin of the Earth Defense Force. On behalf of humanity and our allies in the Galactic Council, I order you to withdraw your fleet from this system immediately. The Velkron command deck fell silent. Then laughter erupted. Zrath Thor himself laughed so hard his scales rattled. An order? The humans were giving him an order? Captain, Zrath Thor said when he could speak again. You have 12 ships. I have 500. You are either insane or stupid. Which is it? Neither, Sujin replied. I am a human who remembers what my species used to be. I am trying to give you a chance to survive. Please, withdraw your fleet. I don't want to do what I'm about to do. The tone of her voice made Zrath Thor pause. She did not sound afraid. She did not sound like she was bluffing. She sounded sad, like someone preparing to do something terrible, but necessary. You threaten me? Zrath Thor said, anger replacing amusement. You dare threaten the Velkron Empire? I'm not threatening you, Sujin said. I'm warning you. There's a difference. Last chance, Admiral. Withdraw now. Zrath Thor's anger exploded. Destroy them. All ships, open fire. I want those 12 vessels turned to dust. The communication channel closed. The Velkron fleet, all 500 ships, activated their weapons systems. Plasma cannons charged. Missile bays opened. Energy weapons locked onto targets. It was enough firepower to destroy a small planet. All ships fire, Zrath Thor commanded. Space lit up with destruction. Thousands of plasma bolts and energy beams erupted from the Velkron fleet. Missiles by the hundreds streaked toward the human ships. It was a wall of death, enough firepower to overwhelm any defense system ever built. The human ships did not move. They simply waited as the massive attack approached. On the Requiem's bridge, Sujin watched the incoming fire. Her crew was tense but focused. Lieutenant Park Ji-woo had her hands hovering over the weapons controls. Commander Kim Tae-hyun monitored the defensive systems. Memoria, Sujin said calmly. Activate quantum displacement fields. All ships. Acknowledged, the AI replied. Defensive systems engaging. The Velkron weapons reached the human ships. Then, something impossible happened. The plasma bolts simply vanished. Thousands of them, each one capable of melting through ship hulls, just ceased to exist before they could make contact. Energy beams disappeared, as if they had been switched off. Missiles flew toward the human vessels and then were simply gone, erased from space entirely. Not a single shot reached the human ships. Not one. On the Velkron flagship, silence filled the command deck. Every eye was fixed on the displays, watching the sensor data that made no sense. Their attack had been perfect. The weapons had fired correctly. Everything had worked exactly as it should. But the humans were undamaged. Not even scratched. What happened? Zrath Thor demanded. Where did our weapons go? Unknown, Admiral, the sensor officer said, his voice shaking. The weapons simply disappeared, approximately 1,000 meters from the human vessels. Our sensors detected brief spatial anomalies at the point of disappearance, but nothing else. It's as if the attacks were shunted into another dimension. That's impossible, Zrath Thor roared. No shield technology can do that. It's not shield technology, sir, another officer said quietly. At least, not any shield technology in our database. This is something completely different. On the Council fleet, Elder Vorn watched the displays with growing shock. He had seen the Velkron attack. He knew how powerful their weapons were. His own fleet's shields could not have survived even a fraction of that firepower. But the human ships had not even tried to dodge. They had simply made the attack disappear. What are they? Vorn whispered. Beside him, Ambassador Min-jun said nothing. His expression was sad, like someone watching a terrible secret revealed. Sujin opened a channel to the Velkron flagship. Admiral Zrath Thor, you have fired on us. By the laws of war, we are now permitted to respond. I'm going to demonstrate what humanity is capable of. I hope you're paying attention. Memoria, Sujin said, her voice heavy with reluctance. Designate 50 enemy vessels. Formation positions Alpha 7 through Alpha 57. Spatial severance cannon. Minimum yield. Sequential fire. Target designated. Memoria confirmed. Weapon charging. Captain, I remind you that even at minimum yield, the targeted vessels will be completely destroyed. All crew aboard those ships will die instantly. I know, Sujin said quietly. She looked at the displays, seeing the Velcron ships. Each one held hundreds of crew members, hundreds of lives. She had the power to erase them from existence with a thought. But they won't stop unless they understand what they're facing. Fire. The Requiem fired. There was no dramatic light show, no visible beam. Space simply rippled, and one of the Velcron battlecruisers ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a massive vessel bristling with weapons. The next moment, there was only empty space where the ship had been. Not destroyed, not blown apart, just gone. Memoria fired again. Another ship vanished. Then another. The sequential targeting meant the weapon fired once every 2 seconds. In the space of 100 seconds, 50 Velcron warships simply stopped existing. 300 meters of armored hull, hundreds of crew members, advanced weapons systems, all erased from reality completely. The Velcron fleet panicked. Ships broke formation. Commanders shouted. Confused orders. Nothing in their training or experience had prepared them for weapons that simply removed targets from existence. Zrath Thor stared at his displays, watching 50 of his ships disappear. His mind tried to understand what he was seeing, but it made no sense. His scales had gone pale, a Velcron reaction to extreme stress. "What weapon is that?" he whispered. His sensor officer looked at the readings, his hands shaking as he worked. "Admiral, the human weapon appears to create localized ruptures in space-time. The targeted vessels are not destroyed. They are erased at the quantum level. There is no defense against this. Shields are meaningless because the weapon operates outside normal space." Zrath Thor felt something he had never experienced in his entire life. Fear. Real. Genuine. Fear. "All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessels," he ordered. "Every weapon we have, fire everything." The Velcron fleet responded. Thousands more weapons fired at the human ships. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, plasma torpedoes, fusion bombs. Everything the Empire had developed over centuries of conquest. It was 10 times the firepower of the first attack, and once again, none of it reached the human ships. The quantum displacement fields simply shunted everything into pocket dimensions. The humans sat calmly in the middle of the firestorm, completely untouched. Sujin watched the second attack disappear. She felt sick. She had just killed thousands of people. It did not matter that they were enemies. It did not matter that they had attacked first. She had used weapons that should never have been unsealed, and people had died because of it, but she could not stop now. The Velcron had to understand. "Memoria," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Deploy the planet killer countermeasure. I want them to see what we can defend against." In the Velcron fleet, Admiral Zrath Thor made a desperate decision. He ordered the deployment of their most powerful weapon, the one they had used to destroy 6 civilizations. It was a quantum compression bomb, designed to collapse matter at the atomic level. When it detonated, it would create a chain reaction that could destroy an entire planet. The Velcron called it the final word. The weapon launched from the flagship, accelerating toward the human fleet. It was massive, 50 meters long, covered in stabilization fields to keep the compressed matter contained until detonation. Zrath Thor watched it fly. This would work. It had to work. Nothing could survive the final word. The human ships would be obliterated, and this nightmare would end. On the Requiem, alarms sounded. Memoria's voice remained calm. "Captain, detecting Velcron planet killer weapon. Time to detonation. 30 seconds. Recommend immediate evasion. No, Sujin said. Let it come. Then show them what we can do. The quantum compression bomb reached the human fleet. The Velcron watched, hoping against hope that their ultimate weapon would succeed where everything else had failed. The bomb exploded, and then the explosion simply stopped. One moment, there was a growing sphere of destructive energy, enough to erase all 12 human ships and probably damage the nearby Velcron vessels as well. The next moment, the explosion was frozen in time, held in stasis by fields the Velcron could not even begin to understand. The frozen explosion hung in space like a miniature sun, completely contained. The human ships sat calmly beside it, undamaged. Then the Requiem did something that made every species watching question reality itself. It created a small portal in space and simply pushed the frozen explosion through it. The portal closed, and the explosion was gone, sent to some other dimension or location where it could detonate harmlessly. Silence filled every ship in the system. Council species watched in shock. Velcron commanders stared at their displays in disbelief. And somewhere, species who had been watching the confrontation through long-range sensors began to realize that they had been sharing the galaxy with something they never understood. Admiral Zrath Thor felt his confidence shatter completely. His 500 ships, his proven tactics, his superior experience. All of it meant nothing against weapons that operated on principles he could not comprehend. Sujin opened a channel to all Velcron ships. This is Captain Lee Sujin, to all Velcron forces. You have now seen what humanity is capable of. You have seen your weapons fail. You have seen your strongest attack neutralized. I do not enjoy this. I wish I did not have to show you these things. But you must understand. You cannot win this battle. Her face on the screen was hard but not cruel. Sad but not weak. I am now going to give you one final chance. Withdraw your fleet from this system. Leave Council space and return to your own territory. Do this, and you will live. Continue attacking, and I will be forced to erase your entire fleet from existence. Choose wisely. Zrath Thor looked at his displays. 450 ships remained. Against 12 human vessels that could not be harmed and could delete his ships at will. There was no shame in retreating from an enemy that could manipulate reality itself. But he was Velcron. He was a warrior of the old bloodlines. He would not retreat. Never, he transmitted back. The Velcron Empire does not surrender. We do not retreat. We win, or we die as warriors. Sujin closed her eyes briefly. She had hoped it would not come to this. Then I'm sorry, she said quietly. Tell them we need reinforcements. Admiral Zrath Thor watched his communication displays light up with incoming messages from his fleet. His commanders wanted orders. His captains wanted to know what to do. His warriors wanted to understand how they could fight an enemy that their weapons could not touch. He had no answers for them. Admiral, his second-in-command said quietly, perhaps we should consider the human offer. Our weapons are ineffective. Their defensive systems are beyond anything we can counter. Retreating now would preserve the fleet and allow us to develop countermeasures. Zrath Thor turned to face him. Are you suggesting we run from merchants? From traders? The Empire has never retreated. Not once in our entire history. If we start now, every species in the galaxy will see us as weak. Our conquered territories will rebel. Our allies will abandon us. But Admiral, then we die as Velcron, Zrath Thor said firmly. He opened fleet-wide communications. All ships. This is Admiral Zrath Thor. I know you are confused. I know you are afraid. But we are Velcron. We are warriors. Our ancestors conquered 7 star systems with nothing but courage and determination. We will not be defeated by 12 ships, no matter what weapons they possess. He could see doubt on his officers' faces. But they were trained to obey. Prepare for full fleet assault. All weapons. All ships. Coordinated strike. If their defensive systems can absorb individual attacks, we will see if they can handle everything we have, firing at once. Deep in the Velcron fleet, something else was happening. A coded transmission was being sent to distant space. Admiral Thor had allies in the Imperial Command, and they had been watching this battle with growing concern. When the final word failed, they made a decision. They would send reinforcements. 300 more Velcron warships, each commanded by officers who believed in the Empire's destiny to rule the galaxy. They would arrive in 4 hours, and together, 800 ships would destroy these mysterious humans or die trying. On the Requiem, Captain Lee Soo-jin received a report from Memoria. Captain, long-range sensors have detected quantum communications from the Velcron flagship. They appear to be requesting reinforcements. How many? Soo-jin asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Analysis suggests approximately 300 additional warships. Estimated arrival time, 4 hours. Soo-jin's weapons officer, Lieutenant Park Ji-woo, turned in her seat. Captain, we should destroy the Velcron fleet now, before their reinforcements arrive. 800 ships will be much harder to deal with than 500. Harder for who? Soo-jin asked quietly. We can disable any number of ships. But that's not the question, is it? The question is, how many people have to die before they understand? They're calling for reinforcements, Ji-woo pointed out. They're not going to give up. Soo-jin knew she was right. The Velcron were warriors to their core. They would keep fighting until they won, or until they were all dead. She had hoped that demonstrating humanity's power would be enough to make them retreat. But she had underestimated their pride. Memoria, open a channel to Ambassador Park on the Council command ship. Ambassador Min-jun's face appeared on the screen. He looked tired and worried. Captain Lee, the Council has been watching the battle. They have questions. I imagine they do, Soo-jin said. What do you need from me? The truth would be a good start, Min-jun replied. Elder Vorn and the other representatives want to know what humanity really is. They want to know how merchants and diplomats suddenly have weapons that can manipulate space and time. They want to know if they've been living next to monsters for 200 years. Soo-jin felt the weight of that question. Are we monsters, Ambassador? That depends on what we do next, Min-jun said. The Velcron are calling for reinforcements. 800 ships total. Can you stop them? Yes, Soo-jin said without hesitation. We can stop 8,000 if necessary. That's not the issue. The issue is how we stop them. We can erase their entire fleet in minutes. We have weapons that can delete matter from existence. We have defenses that make us invulnerable. We are, for all practical purposes, unbeatable in conventional warfare. Then, what's the problem? The problem is that we have to live with ourselves afterward, Soo-jin said. Every Velcron we kill, every ship we erase, that's on us. Our ancestors built these weapons and used them without restraint. It nearly destroyed Earth. We sealed them away because we understood that having the power to destroy everything means nothing if you lose your soul in the process. Min-jun was quiet for a moment. What do you want to do? I want to find a way to stop the Velcron without killing all of them, Soo-jin said. I want to show them that they can't win, but I want them to survive, to learn that lesson. The question is whether they'll let us do that. The reinforcements will arrive in 4 hours, Min-jun pointed out. What's your plan? Soo-jin looked at her displays, seeing the Velcron fleet preparing for another attack. 800 ships. Hundreds of thousands of crew members. All of them warriors who believed in their cause. All of them following orders from leaders who refused to surrender. I'm going to try something, Soo-jin said. If it works, we can end this without more killing. If it doesn't, then I'll have to use maximum force. Either way, the Council is about to learn exactly what humanity became during our darkest days. The channel closed. Soo-jin turned to her crew. Memoria, how long can we maintain a full fleet time dilation field? Approximately 8 hours before reactor reserves are depleted, the AI replied. That's longer than we need, Soo-jin said. Here's what we're going to do. The Velcron are about to attack with everything they have. Let them exhaust their ammunition. Let them fire until they have nothing left. Then, before their reinforcements arrive, we're going to demonstrate exactly how outmatched they are. Commander Kim Tae-hyun looked worried. Captain, if we just sit here and absorb their attacks, they might think we're vulnerable. They might not realize we're choosing to let them fire. Then we'll make sure they understand, Sujin said. She opened a channel to all Velcron ships. Admiral Zrath Thor, I know you're planning another attack. I know you've called for reinforcements. I'm going to make you an offer. Fire everything you have at us. Use every weapon, every missile, every energy cell. Exhaust your entire fleet's ammunition. And when you're done, when you've thrown everything you have at us and accomplished nothing, I want you to really think about what that means. Zrath Thor's face appeared on her screen. You mock us? No. Sujin said sincerely. I respect you. You're warriors. You're brave. You refuse to give up. Those are admirable qualities. But courage without wisdom is just another word for suicide. Fire at us. Prove to yourself and your warriors that you tried everything. Then, maybe, you'll be ready to listen. The channel closed. On the Velcron flagship, Admiral Zrath Thor felt torn. The human captain was offering to let him attack. She was essentially giving him free shots, knowing his weapons could not harm her ships. It was the most insulting thing he could imagine, but it was also an opportunity. Maybe, if they concentrated enough fire, if they hit the human ships with absolutely everything simultaneously, maybe they could overwhelm whatever defensive systems the humans used. All ships, Zrath Thor ordered. Charge all weapons. When I give the command, I want simultaneous fire from every vessel. Plasma cannons, missiles, kinetic weapons, energy beams, everything. Hold nothing back. Throughout the Velcron fleet, crews rushed to obey. Weapons systems that had already been used were recharged. Missile bays were reloaded. Backup power was diverted to energy weapons. Every commander received the same order: fire everything. On the Council command ship, Elder Vorn watched the Velcron preparations with growing dread. Ambassador Park, the Velcron fleet is preparing for a massive assault. The human ships are not evading. Why are they not moving? Because they don't need to, Min-jun said quietly. Elder Vorn, what you're about to see is a demonstration of why humanity sealed our weapons away. Watch carefully. This is what we used to be. The Velcron fleet fired. Not in waves, not in sequential attacks, but everything at once. 450 warships releasing their entire arsenal in a single, overwhelming assault. Tens of thousands of plasma bolts filled space. Missiles by the thousands screamed toward their targets. Energy beams bright enough to damage unshielded sensors crisscrossed the battle space. Kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic speeds created trails of distorted space-time. It was enough firepower to destroy several planets. It was the concentrated military might of an empire that had conquered 6 civilizations. It was everything the Velcron had, all focused on 12 human ships. The human vessels simply sat there and let it come. On the Requiem, Memoria announced calmly. Incoming fire detected. Estimated time to impact, 20 seconds. Quantum displacement fields, operating at maximum efficiency. All defensive systems functioning perfectly. Steady, Sujin said to her crew. Remember, we're trying to teach them a lesson, not humiliate them. Let them see that they tried their absolute best. The Velcron assault reached the human fleet. Space itself seemed to scream as impossible amounts of energy and matter converged on a single point. Sensors on the Council ships overloaded from the sheer intensity of the attack. It was like watching a star go supernova in slow motion. And then, as before, everything simply disappeared. The quantum displacement fields absorbed every single shot. Plasma bolts were shunted to pocket dimensions. Missiles vanished before impact. Energy beams ceased to exist. Kinetic projectiles were sent somewhere else. Somewhen else. The attack lasted for 5 minutes, the Velcron pouring out everything they had. When it finally ended, when the last weapon had discharged and the last missile had vanished, the human ships remained exactly where they had been, undamaged, unmoved, not even dirty. In the Velcron fleet, stunned silence followed. They had fired everything. Every weapon, every ammunition type, every tactical option they possessed, and they had accomplished nothing. Not a scratch, not a dent, nothing. Zrath Thor stared at his displays, his 4 arms hanging limply at his sides. His scales had gone completely pale. A Velcron's body's response to devastating stress. Around him, his officers looked at each other with expressions of shock and disbelief. "What are they?" someone whispered. Before Zrath Thor could respond, the human captain opened a channel again. "You're out of ammunition. Rather's not of fails. You're out of ammunition," Sujin said. "Your reinforcements won't arrive for another 3.5 hours. Your ships are effectively defenseless. I could destroy your entire fleet right now, and there's nothing you could do to stop me." She paused, letting that sink in. "But I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to show you something. Memoria. Activate full defensive grid. All ships. Around the 12 human vessels, space began to ripple. The quantum displacement fields that had been protecting individual ships suddenly expanded, linking together into a single, massive field. It grew larger and larger, eventually encompassing the entire battle space. The Council fleet, the Velcron fleet, even the nearby planets were suddenly enclosed in a bubble of altered space-time. "What you're experiencing now is a quantum displacement field at maximum power," Sujin explained. "Inside this field, I control space and time. I can make weapons disappear. I can freeze ships in temporal stasis. I can erase matter from existence. I am, essentially, a goddess of this small pocket of reality." Throughout the Velcron fleet, panic was beginning to set in. They were trapped inside this field with an enemy they could not harm, who could destroy them at will. "But here's the thing," Sujin continued, her voice softer now. "I don't want to be a goddess. I don't want to have this power. My ancestors built these weapons during a terrible war. They used them without restraint, without mercy. They killed billions of their own people. They nearly destroyed our entire species. When the war finally ended, the survivors looked at what they had become and were horrified." She paused. "We sealed these weapons away. We promised ourselves we would never use them again unless absolutely necessary. For 200 years, we kept that promise. We became traders and diplomats instead of warriors. We made friends instead of conquering territories. We chose peace." On the Velcron flagship, Zrath Thor was listening now. Really listening. "But you forced our hand," Sujin said. "You threatened our friends. You would not accept peace or diplomacy. So we had to become weapons again. And I hate it. I hate having this much power. I hate knowing I can kill all of you with a thought. Do you understand what I'm saying, Admiral?" For the first time in the conversation, Zrath Thor found his voice. "You're saying you don't want to fight." "I'm saying I wish I didn't have to," Sujin corrected. "But if you make me choose between letting you destroy the Council and using these terrible weapons, I will choose to use them. I'll hate myself afterward, but I'll do it." Long-range sensors detected new spatial distortions. The Velcron reinforcements were arriving early. 300 fresh warships emerged from their faster-than-light travel, joining their allies in the battle space. Zrath Thor felt a moment of hope. Maybe with 800 ships, they could overcome whatever the humans had. But Sujin just looked sad. "Your reinforcements are here," 300 ships with full ammunition and fresh crews. Admiral, please think carefully about what you do next. You've seen what we can do. You've seen your weapons fail. You've felt what it's like to be completely outmatched. Do you really want to watch 300 more ships and their crews die? In the arriving fleet, the ranking officer was Admiral Krishvar, a Velkron female of the warrior caste. She immediately assessed the situation, seeing the strange field surrounding the battle space. Seeing her allies' ships apparently undamaged, but motionless. Admiral Zrath Thor, she transmitted. We have arrived as requested. We are ready to assist in destroying the human vessels. Before Zrath Thor could respond, Sujin's voice cut across all channels. Admiral Krishvar, I am Captain Lee Sujin, of Earth Defense Force. Your fleet has just entered a quantum displacement field controlled by my ships. Before you do anything else, I recommend you watch this demonstration. Memoria, Sujin said quietly. Target the closest uninhabited moon. The Requiem fired. The small moon, a ball of rock roughly 200 kilometers in diameter, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, orbiting peacefully. The next moment, there was only empty space where it had been. That was 10% yield, Sujin said into the stunned silence. At maximum yield, I can erase a planetary body the size of your homeworld. I have 11 more ships with identical capabilities. Between us, we could sterilize your entire empire. In a matter of days, she let that sink in. But we don't want to do that. We don't want to be genocidal monsters. We just want you to stop attacking our friends and leave council space. Is that really such an unreasonable request? Admiral Krishvar looked at the empty space where the moon had been. She had commanded warships for 30 years. She had participated in 17 conquests. She thought. She understood warfare. She understood nothing. What do you want from us? She asked, her voice shaken. I want you to live, Sujin said simply. I want your crews to go home to their families. I want your warriors to tell stories about the battle, where they faced impossible odds. I want you to remember this day and choose a better path. Is that possible? Can the Velkron Empire learn to stop conquering and start coexisting? Zrathor and Krishvar looked at each other across their communication channels. They were warriors. They were conquerors. Retreat and coexistence were not in their nature. But neither was suicide. And staying here, facing these human weapons, would be exactly that. If we withdraw, Zrath Thor asked slowly, what happens to the Empire? What happens to our territories? That's between you and the Council, Sujin said. Humanity will not dictate terms. We're not conquerors. But I imagine the Council will want certain guarantees. Probably some kind of monitoring to ensure you don't start conquering again. That would destroy the Empire, Krishvar said. The Empire destroyed itself when it decided conquest was more important than coexistence, Sujin replied. I'm just making the consequences clear. You can rebuild as something better, or you can die as you are. Your choice. For a long moment, no one spoke. The fate of the Velkron Empire hung in the balance, decided by two admirals facing an enemy they could not hope to defeat. The Galactic Council chamber had never been so crowded. Every representative from every member species was present, along with observers from dozens of neutral systems. They had all come to hear humanity explain itself. Ambassador Park Min-jun stood at the central podium, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon him. Captain Lee Sujin stood beside him in her military uniform, representing the human forces that had stopped the Velkron Empire. Behind them, holographic displays showed footage from the battle, images that had already spread across the galaxy at light speed. Elder Vorn called the session to order. His ancient eyes were filled with confusion and something that might have been fear. Ambassador Park, this council has known humanity for 200 years. In that time, you have been our friends, our trading partners, our diplomatic allies. You help negotiate 17 peace treaties. Your merchants operate in every council system. Your engineers helped build 3 orbital stations. He gestured at the displays showing the Requiem erasing Velcron warships from existence. And yet, you hid this from us. You hid weapons that can manipulate space and time itself. You hid defensive systems that make you invulnerable. You hid the fact that you are, perhaps, the most powerful military force in the known galaxy. Why? The question hung in the air. Minjun looked out at the assembled representatives. Some looked angry. Others looked frightened. All of them wanted answers. Before I answer that, Minjun said carefully, I need to tell you a story. It's not a pleasant story. It's not one that humanity is proud of. But you deserve to know the truth. It's not one the men. It's not one that humanity is proud of. It's not one the Ternal starred. It's not one the Ternal. He touched a control, and the displays shifted to show Earth as it had been during the Unification Wars. Cities burning. Continents scarred by weapons that should never have existed. Casualty numbers that made even the hardened warriors in the Council flinch. 250 years ago, Earth was divided. Minjun began. Nations fought each other over resources, ideology, territory, everything that species fight about. At first, the wars were conventional. Terrible, but understandable. Then someone developed quantum manipulation technology, the ability to affect matter at the subatomic level. The ability to tear holes in space-time. New images appeared. Weapons firing beams that made reality itself scream. Defensive systems that bent light and space. Ships that could move faster than thought and hit harder than nature itself. Both sides in the conflict developed these weapons, Minjun continued, his voice heavy with old shame. Both sides believed that having overwhelming power would force the other to surrender. Instead, both sides used that power. Cities vanished. Oceans boiled. An entire continent was erased from existence. 3 billion people died. The council chamber was completely silent. These were numbers beyond most species' comprehension. The Velcron had destroyed 6 civilizations, but even they had not killed 3 billion of their own people. The war ended not because anyone won, Minjun said, but because the survivors looked at what they had become and were horrified. They had built weapons that could destroy worlds. They had used those weapons against their own species. They had become monsters. He paused, letting that sink in. So, they made a choice. They sealed the weapons away. They unified under a single government to ensure no one could start the wars again. They decided to become something different. Something better. When we developed faster than light travel and encountered the Council, we had a decision to make. Did we present ourselves as the warriors we had been? Or did we present ourselves as the people we wanted to become? We chose the latter, Sujin said, speaking for the first time. We introduced ourselves as merchants and diplomats because that's what we wanted to be. We hid our military capabilities not out of deception, but out of shame. We were afraid that if anyone knew what we were capable of, they would fear us. Or worse, they would want us to use our weapons on their behalf. A Chirik representative stood up, his translation device turning his clicks into words. But you did use your weapons. You used them against the Velcron. Yes, Minjun acknowledged. Because the Velcron gave us no choice. They refused every diplomatic solution. They threatened to destroy every council world. We could have stayed hidden, kept our secret, and let our friends die. Or we could reveal what we were and stop the Velcron. We chose our friends. And now everyone knows. A Morphean delegate said, her tentacles writhing nervously. Everyone knows that humans have weapons that can erase planets. How are we supposed to feel safe with you? Access. This was the critical moment. Minjun had known this question was coming. Everything depended on how he answered it. You ask how you can feel safe with us? Minjun said quietly. Let me ask you a different question. The Velcron Empire had 800 warships. Captain Lee and her fleet had the power to destroy all of them in minutes. Every ship, every crew member, every warrior. She could have erased them from existence without breaking a sweat. But she didn't. Do you know why? The Council waited. Because despite having the power to commit genocide, we choose not to. Minjun said. That's the real secret of humanity. Not that we have terrible weapons. Many species have terrible weapons. The secret is that we remember what happens when you use those weapons without restraint. We remember the price of letting power overcome wisdom. Sujin stepped forward. During the battle, I disabled 50 Velcron ships before they understood what they were facing. I could have destroyed 500. I could have erased their reinforcements when they arrived. I had the power to end the Velcron Empire completely, but instead, I spent 5 minutes letting them fire at us, exhausting their ammunition, showing them they couldn't win. Do you know why I did that? Why? Because I wanted them to survive, Sujin said simply. I wanted them to learn. I wanted them to go home and remember the day they faced an enemy they couldn't defeat, and I wanted them to choose a better path. Dead warriors can't learn. Dead warriors can't change. Dead warriors are just corpses and tragedy. She looked around the chamber. Yes, humanity has weapons that terrify you. They terrify us too. That's why we sealed them away. That's why we hoped never to use them. But we used them to protect our friends, and we used them with restraint. Doesn't that tell you something about who we are? A new voice spoke up. It was Ambassador Krishvar of the Velcron Empire, recently arrived under diplomatic protection. She stood with difficulty, her scales still pale from the trauma of the battle. I was there, she said. I commanded 300 ships. I arrived expecting to join a glorious battle. Instead, I watched humans erase a moon from existence with one shot. I knew, in that moment, that they could do the same to our homeworld, to every Velcron world. They had the power to commit genocide against my entire species. She looked at Minjun and Sujin, but they didn't. The human captain told us we could go home. She told us we could live and learn. She had the power to destroy us. And she chose mercy instead. That is the moment I understood that the Velcron Empire had not been defeated by superior weapons. We had been defeated by superior wisdom. The Velcron ambassador sat down. In the silence that followed, Elder Vorn stood up slowly. Ambassador Park, Captain Lee. I believe I speak for many here when I say that we are not angry that you hid your capabilities. We are grateful that you used them to protect us. But we must ask, what happens now? How do we proceed knowing that humanity possesses such power? Minjun had prepared for this question too. We propose a new relationship. Humanity will serve as a defensive force for the Council, but only as a last resort. We will not police the galaxy. We will not impose our will on others. We will not conquer or threaten. But if another force like the Velcron Empire emerges, if someone threatens the peace and freedom that the Council represents, then yes, we will respond. We're offering to be guardians, Sujin said. Sleeping guardians. We'll seal our weapons again, return them to the darkness, where they've waited for 200 years. We'll go back to being merchants and diplomats. But everyone will know that if needed, if there's truly no other choice, the weapons can wake up again. And you want nothing in return? A delegate asked suspiciously. No territory? No special status? No tribute? We want exactly what we've always wanted, Minjun said. To be your friends and partners. To trade peacefully. To share knowledge and culture. The only thing that changes is that now you know we can protect those friendships if necessary. Elder Vorn considered this for a long moment. Then he looked at the other representatives. I would like to propose a vote. All in favor of accepting humanity's proposal and recognizing them as defensive guardians of the Council. Please indicate. When teen use it. One by one, hands, tentacles, claws, and other appendages rose throughout the chamber. Not every species voted in favor. Some still feared humanity's power, but the overwhelming majority chose trust over fear. "The motion passes," Elder Vorn announced. "Ambassador Park, Captain Lee, on behalf of the Galactic Council, we accept your proposal. We trust that humanity will use its power wisely." After the session ended, Min-Jun and Su-Jin walked through the corridors of the council station. They had done what they came to do. The secret was out. But the relationships remained intact. Humanity had revealed its true nature and been accepted anyway. "Do you think it will last?" Su-Jin asked. "The trust? I don't know," Min-Jun admitted. "Some species will always fear us. Some will probably try to develop weapons to counter ours. But I think most of them understand now. We're not monsters. We're just people who made terrible mistakes and learned from them." "What about the Velkron?" Su-Jin wondered. "Will they really change?" "Ambassador Krishvar is meeting with Elder Vorn right now," Min-Jun said. "The Council is demanding complete withdrawal from conquered territories, reparations, and a transition to a more democratic government. The old warrior culture that drove the Empire's expansion is being challenged by younger Velkron, who saw what happened and want something different. So we changed them by not destroying them," Su-Jin said thoughtfully. "Maybe that's the lesson," Min-Jun replied. "Power is easy. Restraint is hard. Killing is simple. Teaching is complicated. But in the long run, the hard choices are the ones that matter." They reached the human quarters, where the crew of the Requiem was preparing to return to Earth. The ship would be sealed again, returned to its dark hangar on the lunar surface. With luck, it would stay there for another 200 years or more. Su-Jin found herself thinking about her great-great-grandmother, the ship captain who had fought in the final battles of the Unification Wars. That woman had used weapons like the Requiem, without hesitation. She had killed thousands of people in the name of victory. And when the war ended, she had been among the survivors who looked at what they had done and decided never to repeat it. "Captain Lee," a voice said behind them. It was Elder Vorn, accompanied by several other council representatives. "May I speak with you privately?" Min-Jun nodded and left, giving them space. Su-Jin waited, wondering what the ancient Thessian wanted. "I watched the battle recordings very carefully," Vorn said quietly. "I saw every decision you made, every choice. You had multiple opportunities to destroy the Velkron fleet completely. You chose not to. Why?" Su-Jin thought about how to answer. "Because my great-great-grandmother made the other choice. She used maximum force. She killed without hesitation. And when the war ended, she spent the rest of her life haunted by the faces of the people she had killed. She told my grandmother that victory without mercy is just another form of defeat. I didn't want to repeat her mistakes. Your restraint saved the Velkron Empire," Vorn said. "It also saved the Council. If you had destroyed 800 warships and all their crews, we would have been grateful, but horrified. We would have wondered if we had traded the Velkron threat for a human threat. But you showed us that humans can have terrible power and still choose mercy. That is why we trust you. W have an arrest and descriptional." He paused, his ancient eyes meeting hers. "It is also why I must ask you a difficult question. What would you have done if the Velkron had not surrendered? If they had kept fighting until you had no choice?" Su-Jin met his gaze steadily. "I would have used maximum force. I would have erased their fleet from existence. I would have done it quickly to minimize suffering. But I would have done it. And then I would have gone home and cried for every life I had taken, even though they were enemies. Because that's what it means to be human. We can do terrible things when necessary, but we never forget that they're terrible." Vorn nodded slowly. "That is the answer I hope to hear. Not that you would never use your full power, but that you would never use it without cost to your soul. That is the difference between a warrior and a weapon. A weapon has no conscience. A warrior carries the weight of every choice. He turned to leave, then paused. Your great-great-grandmother would be proud of you, Captain Lee. You inherited her power, but not her burden. You learned from her mistakes without having to live through them yourself. That is a rare gift. After Vorn left, Sujin stood alone in the corridor. Through the viewport, she could see Earth in the distance, a blue and green jewel against the black of space. Somewhere on that planet, the weapons were being prepared for sealing again. The Requiem would sleep, and hopefully, would not wake for generations. But Sujin knew the weapons would never truly sleep. They would wait in the darkness, ready if needed. And future generations of humans would have to make the same choice her generation had made. To be guardians, not conquerors. To protect, not destroy. To use terrible power with wisdom and restraint. She hoped they would make the right choice. 3 months later, Ambassador Min Jun sat in a small observation lounge on the council station, watching ships come and go. Velcron vessels were withdrawing from their conquered territories, returning home to face an uncertain future. Council ships were escorting them. Not as conquerors, but as peacekeepers, ensuring the transitions went smoothly. Captain Lee joined him, holding 2 cups of tea. She had stayed at the council station as a liaison between Earth Defense Force and council security. The Requiem was back in its lunar hangar, sealed and waiting. I got a message from Admiral Krishvar, Sujin said, sitting down. The Velcron government is in chaos. Half the Empire wants to continue the old ways. The other half wants complete reform. It's going to be messy for a while. Treed. Change always is, Min Jun replied. But at least they have the opportunity to change. That's more than they would have had if we had destroyed them. Do you think we made the right choice? Sujin asked. Sometimes I wonder if we should have just stayed hidden. Let the galaxy sort out its own problems. Min Jun shook his head. The council species are our friends. We've lived alongside them for 2 centuries. When friends are in danger, you help them. That's not complicated. But now everyone knows what we are. Sujin pointed out. Some species look at us with fear now. Some with suspicion. The easy relationships we had are gone. True, Min Jun agreed. But they're being replaced with honest relationships. Before, we were friendly traders. Now we're friends who happen to be very dangerous when necessary. I think I prefer the honesty, even if it's more complicated. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, thousands of light years away, the Velcron Empire was learning to be something new. Somewhere behind them, Earth was returning to peaceful commerce and quiet diplomacy. And somewhere in between, the council species were adjusting to the reality that their gentle human friends were also the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Memoria sent me a message, Sujin said after a while. Even in storage, the ship's AI monitors certain communication channels. She detected something interesting. What's that? Several species are now studying humanity's history. Not our weapons, but our choices. They want to understand how a species can be both powerful and restrained. They want to learn from our mistakes, so they don't repeat them. Min Jun smiled. That's better than I hoped for. We spent 200 years hiding our past. Now, maybe our past can help others. There's one more thing, Sujin said. A university on Thessia is starting a new course. It's called The Ethics of Power. Lessons from Earth's Unification Wars. They've asked if I would consider teaching it after I retire from active service. Are you going to do it? I think so, Sujin said. Someone should teach the next generation that having power is not the same as having wisdom. That being able to destroy everything doesn't mean you should. That the hardest battles are not against enemies, but against your own worst impulses. Your great-great-grandmother would approve, Min Jun said. I hope so. Sujin replied quietly. I hope all our ancestors would approve. We took the weapons they built for destruction and used them for protection instead. We remembered their mistakes and chose differently. Maybe that's the best memorial we can give them. Far away, in the cold darkness of the lunar surface, the Requiem waited in its hangar. Its weapons were sealed, its systems were dormant, but somewhere in its quantum mind, Memoria dreamed of the day when a captain had chosen mercy over destruction, restraint over revenge, wisdom over power. And in that dark silence, the ancient AI understood something that its creators had not known during the terrible wars that birthed it. True strength was not measured in firepower or defensive capability. True strength was measured in the ability to have overwhelming power and choose not to use it. Humanity had learned that lesson at terrible cost. Now they were teaching it to the galaxy, not through lectures or preaching, but through simple demonstration. They had revealed themselves as weapons of terrible power, and then they had chosen to be guardians instead. It was a lesson the galaxy would remember for a very long time. And perhaps, in some distant future, when new threats emerged and new choices had to be made, that lesson would make all the difference. The war machines slept. The warriors became merchants again. The weapons waited in darkness. And across the galaxy, species looked at humanity with new understanding. They were not monsters hiding among them. They were people who had faced their own darkness and chosen to become something better. They had the power to destroy everything, and they used it only to protect. They remembered what they had been, but they chose what they would become. And that, in the end, was the real story. Not about weapons that could erase worlds, but about people who chose not to use them. Not about power without limits, but about wisdom that knew when to stop. Not about warriors who conquered, but about guardians who protected. Earth's forgotten war machines had awakened. They had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of. And then, most importantly, they had gone back to sleep. That was the true power. Not the weapons themselves, but the choice to seal them away again.